Before we begin this story, take a moment to imagine something. Imagine working day and night to send the man you love to another country so he can chase his dream, only to be abandoned, betrayed by the very family you trusted, and left homeless while carrying his child. Now imagine the moment he finally returns and discovers the truth. What happened next shocked everyone. But before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes in true love and loyalty. Because the story you are about to hear is not just about betrayal. It is about sacrifice, pain of forgiveness, and a love that refused to die. Now let's begin. The early morning sun crept slowly through the thin curtains of the small apartment, casting soft golden light across the room. Inside the modest two-room apartment, Chidinma was already awake. She moved quietly around the kitchen corner, tying her wrapper tightly around her waist as she stirred a pot of boiling water. The smell of frying eggs soon filled the room, mixing with the scent of fresh bread she had bought the night before. On the small wooden table were 2 plates and 2 cups of tea. Chidinma always woke up early to prepare breakfast before Obinna left for work. It had become their routine ever since they got married 3 years ago. Their life wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. Obinna worked as a site supervisor for a construction company. His salary wasn't huge, but it was steady enough to cover rent, food, and a few little comforts. Chidinma also helped by running a small fabric stall at Balagan Market. She loved colorful fabrics and had a natural talent for convincing customers to buy. Together, they made things work. As she arranged the plates neatly, Chidinma glanced toward the bed. Obinna was still asleep, one arm stretched across the mattress, his breathing slow and steady. She smiled. Her husband worked long hours, often returning home exhausted from supervising construction workers under the scorching sun. He deserved his rest. But just then, his alarm rang loudly. Obinna groaned and reached for the phone, silencing it quickly. "Morning already?" he muttered. Chidinma laughed softly. "You said that yesterday too." Obinna sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "Maybe one day the alarm will pity me." "Well, the eggs won't pity you if they get cold," Chidinma teased. That immediately got his attention. "Eggs?" he said, suddenly alert. "Yes, Madam Chef made eggs today." Obinna jumped out of bed dramatically. "Then I must not waste time." They both laughed. Moments like this made their small home feel warm and full of love. As they ate breakfast, Obinna talked about the building project he was supervising. "The contractor wants the roofing completed before the weekend," he said, sipping his tea. "But the workers are too slow." "You're always complaining about workers," Chidinma said playfully. "Because they always give me a headache." She shook her head. "Just don't shout at them too much. You know you can be scary sometimes." Obinna pretended to look offended. "Me? Scary?" "Yes." He laughed and stood up, picking up his bag. "All right, Madam Peacekeeper. I'm leaving before I become late." Chidinma walked him to the door like she always did. Before leaving, Obinna pulled her into a quick hug. "I'll see you tonight." "I'll be waiting," she replied with a smile. He stepped out into the busy street, disappearing into the sea of morning commuters. Chidinma stood at the doorway for a moment, watching him go. She had no idea that everything in their lives was about to change. The day moved quickly at Balagan Market. The market was always loud and full of life. Traders shouted prices, customers bargained aggressively, and the air smelled of spices, sweat, and freshly cooked street food. Chidinma arranged colorful fabrics on her wooden stall, carefully spreading out the bright patterns so they would attract attention. A young woman stopped by. "How much for this ankara?" she asked. 4,000 naira, Chidinma replied. "Ah, that's too expensive." Okay, Chidinma said with a friendly smile. "How much do you want to pay?" The woman grinned. 3,000. Chidinma shook her head dramatically. "You want to make me cry today." They both laughed. Moments later, the customer walked away happily with the fabric. Chidinma counted the money and slipped it into her purse. Business was not bad today. Still, as the afternoon sun grew hotter, she felt a strange uneasiness. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was just one of those days. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Obina arrived at the construction site. But something felt wrong immediately. Instead of the usual busy activity of workers carrying cement and climbing scaffolding, small groups of workers were standing around whispering. The atmosphere felt tense. Obina walked toward a group of workers. "Why is everyone standing around?" he asked. No one answered immediately. Finally, one of the older workers sighed. "Haven't you heard?" "Heard what?" "The company." Obina frowned. "What about the company?" "The project has been stopped." Obina felt confused. "Stopped? What do you mean stopped?" Just then, the site manager stepped out of the office building. His face looked serious. "All staff, please gather here," he called. Within minutes, dozens of workers gathered around him. Some looked worried. Others looked angry. The manager cleared his throat. "I'm afraid I have bad news," he began. Obina felt his chest tighten. The company has been facing serious financial problems for months. A murmur spread through the crowd. Unfortunately, the situation has gotten worse. The company is shutting down all operations effective immediately. Silence fell. The words felt unreal. As a result, the manager continued, "Everyone here will be laid off." For a moment, no one moved. Then the shouting began. "What? You can't do this. What about our salaries?" The manager raised his hands helplessly. "We will try to settle outstanding payments, but the company no longer has funds to continue the project." Obina felt the world spinning. Laid off. The words echoed in his mind. His job, gone. Later that evening, Obina walked slowly home. The usually noisy streets sounded distant and muffled. His thoughts were heavy. How would he tell Chidinma? How would they survive? By the time he reached their apartment, the sun was already setting. The door opened before he could knock. Chidinma stood there smiling. "You're late today." But the smile faded when she saw his face. "Obina, what's wrong?" He stepped inside slowly. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he sat down. "The company is shutting down," he said quietly. Chidinma blinked. "What do you mean?" "We've all been laid off." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Chidinma slowly sat beside him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then she gently held his hand. "It's okay," she said softly. Obina shook his head. "No, it's not." His voice was filled with frustration. "I worked there for 6 years. 6 years. Chidinma." "I know. What are we going to do now?" Chidinma looked at him calmly. "We will figure something out." Obina looked at her with tired eyes. "You always say that." "And we always do." He sighed deeply. For the first time in years, he felt completely lost. But Chidinma squeezed his hand reassuringly. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of the storm that would test their love in ways they could never imagine. The days that followed Obina's job loss felt strangely quiet. Before, mornings in their small apartment had always been full of movement. Obina rushing to dress for work, Chidinma packing his lunch while reminding him not to forget his documents or helmet. But now everything had slowed down. Too slow. Obina woke up later than usual. Sometimes he sat silently on the small couch staring at the television without really watching anything. Other times he walked outside pretending to search for job opportunities. But most days he returned home with the same defeated look. Chidinma noticed the change immediately. Her husband, who used to laugh easily and speak confidently about the future, now carried a quiet heaviness in his eyes. One evening, she found him sitting alone on the balcony staring into the dark street below. She stepped outside and leaned against the railing beside him. "You didn't eat your dinner," she said gently. "I'm not hungry." Chidinma folded her arms and looked at him. "That's the 3rd time you've said that this week." Obina sighed. "I just need time to think." "About what?" "About how everything went wrong." Chidinma was quiet for a moment. Then she turned and faced him directly. "Nothing went wrong." Obina frowned. "I lost my job. That doesn't mean your life is over." "But it feels like it." She shook her head. You're just tired. Obina let out a bitter laugh. Tired doesn't pay rent. Chidinma placed a hand on his shoulder. We will manage. How? She didn't answer immediately, but deep inside her mind, something had already begun forming. The next morning, Chidinma woke up earlier than usual. Even before the sun rose, the apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. She sat at the small wooden table and spread out their financial records. Their savings were not much, just enough to survive a few months if they were careful. But she knew that was not enough. They needed something bigger, something that could change their situation. Just then, Obina walked into the room rubbing his eyes. You're awake already? He asked. Yes. What are you doing? Planning. He looked confused. Planning what? Our future. Obina pulled out a chair and sat down. You sound very confident. Chidinma gave him a small smile. Because I am. He leaned back. Tell me your plan then. Before she could answer, Obina's phone rang. He picked it up. The number was unfamiliar. Hello. A voice spoke from the other end. Obina. It's me, Chucks. Obina's face lit up slightly. Chucks? It's been years. Chucks had been one of his closest friends during his early days at the construction company. But years ago, Chucks had relocated abroad. To America, he had proudly announced at the time. How are you? Obina asked. I'm good. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Why? I heard about your company shutting down. Obina's expression darkened. News travels fast. Yes, but listen, Chucks continued excitedly. I might have an opportunity for you. Obina sat up straight. What kind of opportunity? The construction firm I work with here in the United States is expanding. They're looking for experienced supervisors. Obina's heart began beating faster. And I recommended you. For a moment, Obina could not speak. You're serious? Yes, your experience fits exactly what they need. Chidinma watched her husband carefully. She could hear the excitement growing in his voice. But there's a problem, Obina said. What? The visa process, documentation, flight tickets. All those things cost money. Chuck sighed. I know. That's the difficult part. How much are we talking about? Chucks mentioned the amount. Obina's face slowly fell. It was more money than he had ever saved in his entire life. That's impossible, Obina said quietly. Don't give up yet, Chucks replied. If you can raise the money, I can guarantee the job. After the call ended, Obina sat silently. Chidinma finally asked the question. What happened? Obina looked at her. There's a job opportunity for me in America. Her eyes widened. America? Yes. That's amazing. Obina shook his head slowly. No, it's not. Why? Because we can't afford it. He told her the amount required. Chidinma's expression remained calm. But inside her mind, something had already started moving. That afternoon, Chidinma went to the market. The sun was blazing hot, and the usual chaos of Balagan Market filled the air. But today, she looked at the market differently. Not as a place of routine, but as a battlefield. If Obina was going to travel to America, the money had to come from somewhere. And she already knew where. Her stall. She began working harder than ever before. Instead of waiting for customers to approach, she actively called out to passers-by. Fine Ankara, beautiful fabrics. Come and see. Soon customers gathered. She smiled warmly, negotiated confidently, and convinced people to buy even when they had only come to look. By midday, she had sold more fabrics than usual. But she didn't stop. After closing her stall in the evening, she walked to another section of the market. A woman she knew sold ready-made children's clothes. Madame Ngozi, Chidinma said. Yes. Can I help you sell tomorrow? I'll take commission. The woman studied her carefully. You're already running your own stall. I just need extra income. After a moment, Madame Ngozi nodded. All right. From that day forward, Chidinma's life changed. She woke up before sunrise. She worked in the market until evening. Then she assisted other traders for small commissions. Some days she barely had time to eat. At night, she returned home exhausted but determined. Obinna began noticing the change. One evening he asked, "Why are you working so hard lately?" Chidinma smiled casually. "Just trying to improve our income. You're doing too much." "I'm fine." But he didn't realize she had already begun saving every extra naira. Quietly, carefully, relentlessly, weeks turned into months. Slowly, the money began to grow. Sometimes the progress felt painfully slow. But Chidinma never gave up. Even when customers insulted her prices. Even when she stood for hours under the scorching sun. Even when her feet ached and her body begged for rest. Every night, she counted the money and placed it inside a small metal box hidden beneath their bed. One evening, as Obinna watched her massage her tired feet, he spoke softly. "You're stronger than I am." Chidinma laughed. "What do you mean? If I were the one in your position, I might have already given up." She looked at him with gentle seriousness. "I will never give up on our future." Obinna reached for her hand. "I don't deserve you." She squeezed his fingers. "Yes, you do." But deep inside her heart, she had made a promise to herself. No matter how long it took, no matter how hard it became, she would raise the money. She would send her husband to America. And one day, when their lives finally changed, they would both look back at this moment and realize something powerful. Sometimes the strongest person in a marriage is the one who refuses to stop believing. Even when everything seems impossible. The small metal box under the bed had become Chidinma's secret companion. Every night, after Obinna had fallen asleep, she would quietly pull it out and sit on the floor with the dim yellow light of their bedside lamp glowing softly over her shoulders. Inside the box were neatly folded bundles of naira notes. Some were crisp. Others were worn from countless exchanges in the busy market. But to Chidinma, each note represented a sacrifice. Every piece of money had a story. A day she skipped lunch. An extra customer she convinced to buy fabric. A long evening helping another trader pack goods just to earn a small commission. She counted the money carefully again that night. Her fingers trembled slightly as she finished. Then she whispered softly to herself. Almost there. Months had passed since Chucks told Obinna about the job opportunity in America. At first, the amount needed had seemed impossible. But Chidinma refused to see it that way. Instead of focusing on how big the amount was, she focused on how much she could save each day. Little by little, step by step, the market traders had started noticing her determination. "Chidinma, you're always the first to arrive and the last to leave," one woman joked. "Are you planning to buy the whole market?" Chidinma simply laughed. "If I buy the market, I'll give you a free stall." But inside, she knew why she was working so hard. She wasn't just selling fabrics. She was building a bridge to her husband's future. One hot afternoon, while arranging her colorful fabrics, a customer approached. The woman examined several materials before finally choosing 3 expensive Ankara designs. Chidinma carefully calculated the total price. The sale was bigger than most she had made in weeks. As the woman handed her the money, Chidinma felt a quiet wave of relief. That evening when she got home, she sat down beside the metal box. For the first time, the amount inside looked different. It looked complete. Her heart began to beat faster. She counted the money again, and again, and again. Tears slowly filled her eyes. She had done it. The money was enough. The next morning, Obinna woke up to find Chidinma already dressed and waiting at the table. There was a strange excitement in her eyes. "Why are you smiling like that?" he asked suspiciously. "Eat first," she said. Obinna frowned. "Why do I feel like you're hiding something?" "Just eat." After breakfast, Chidinma stood up and walked into the bedroom. She returned holding the metal box. Obinna looked confused. "What's that?" She placed it gently on the table and opened it. Bundles of money filled the box. Obinna stared at it silently. "What is this?" he asked slowly. Chidinma looked directly at him. "Your future." Obinna blinked. "I don't understand." She pushed the box slightly toward him. "The visa, the documents, the flight." Realization slowly spread across his face. "No," he said quietly. "Yes, you didn't. I did." Obinna looked at the money again, then back at her. "How long have you been saving this?" "Since the day Chucks called." Obinna stood up abruptly. "This is too much work for you." Chidinma shook her head. "It's not work. It's investment. You've been suffering all this time?" "I wasn't suffering," she replied calmly. "I was building our future." For a moment, Obinna couldn't speak. His eyes were filled with disbelief. "You did this for me? For us?" He slowly sat down again. "I don't deserve you." Chidinma reached across the table and took his hand. "Stop saying that." "But it's true." "No," she said firmly. "You are my husband. Your success is my success." Tears filled Obinna's eyes. For the first time since losing his job, he felt hope again. The weeks that followed were filled with preparation. Obinna began processing his documents immediately. There were forms to complete, interviews to attend, and endless paperwork. But this time, everything felt possible. Each step brought him closer to the dream. Chidinma accompanied him whenever she could. Sometimes they waited for hours in crowded offices, surrounded by other hopeful travelers. Yet even in those long lines, Obinna often glanced at his wife with quiet admiration. Without her, none of this would have been happening. Finally, the day came when his visa was approved. Obinna held the passport in his hands like it was a fragile treasure. "I can't believe this is real," he said. Chidinma smiled proudly. "It's real." But the happiness came with a painful reality. Soon Obinna would have to leave. The night before his departure was quiet. They sat together on the small balcony outside their apartment. The city lights of Lagos flickered in the distance. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Obinna broke the silence. "I wish you were coming with me." Chidinma sighed softly. "One day I will. But not now. Not yet." He looked at her seriously. "As soon as I settle down, I'll bring you to America." "I know. I promise." She nodded. "I believe you." But deep inside, both of them knew the distance would not be easy. The airport was crowded the next morning. Families hugged each other tightly. Children cried. Travelers rushed toward departure gates. Chidinma walked beside Obinna quietly, holding his hand tightly. When they reached the airline counter, the reality of the moment finally hit them. This was really happening. Obinna checked in his luggage. Soon it was time for passengers to proceed toward the departure gate. Chidinma's chest tightened. They stood facing each other. "So, this is it," Obinna said softly. "Yes." He looked into her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." "I do." "You already did." "How?" "By believing in us." Obinna pulled her into a tight embrace. For several seconds they held each other without speaking. "I'll call you every day," he whispered. "Okay. I'll send money every month." "I know. And once everything is ready, I'll bring you there." Chidinma nodded slowly. "I'll be waiting." A boarding announcement echoed through the airport. Obinna reluctantly released her. "I have to go." She forced a smile. "Go and make us proud." He walked a few steps away, then suddenly turned back and ran toward her again. He hugged her even tighter this time. "Thank you," he said again. Then he finally walked toward the departure gate. Chidinma stood there watching until he disappeared from sight. Moments later, she walked toward the large airport windows. Outside, planes were moving slowly across the runway. When Obinna's plane finally lifted into the sky, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered softly to herself, "Go and change our lives." The plane disappeared into the clouds. Chidinma wiped her tears and turned away from the window. She had no idea that the journey ahead would be far more difficult than she had imagined. But one thing was certain. She would wait, no matter how long it took. The apartment felt strangely empty after Obinna left. For the first few days, Chidinma kept expecting to hear the familiar sound of his footsteps outside the door or his voice calling her name when he returned from work. But each evening came and went in silence. The house that once felt warm and lively now felt larger than it actually was. Too quiet, too still. On the third night after his departure, Chidinma lay on the bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her. She reached for her phone and checked the time. 2:13 a.m. Sleep refused to come. Finally, she opened her messaging app and read the last message Obina had sent from the airport before boarding. I love you. I'll call you as soon as I land. Just thinking about it made her smile. Despite the loneliness, she felt proud. Her husband was now on his way to America, chasing the future they had dreamed about together, and she had helped make it possible. 2 days later, Obina finally called. The phone rang while Chidinma was arranging fabrics at her stall in Balagan Market. She almost dropped the cloth in excitement. Obina, she answered immediately. Chidinma. His voice sounded distant but joyful. How was the journey? Long, he laughed. Very long. Did you arrive safely? Yes. Everything is so different here. Different how? The buildings are taller. The roads are wide. And the weather, he paused. It's freezing. Chidinma laughed. You'll get used to it. They talked for nearly 30 minutes. Obina described the company that had hired him, the small apartment he was temporarily sharing with another Nigerian worker, and the busy streets of the city. Before ending the call, his voice softened. I miss you. I miss you too. Once I settle down, I'll start sending money. You don't need to rush. I want to. Chidinma smiled warmly. You're already doing enough. They said goodbye reluctantly, but after the call ended, Chidinma felt stronger. Even though they were separated by thousands of miles, their connection remained strong. A few weeks later, Chidinma moved into Obina's family house. Before leaving for America, Obina had insisted on it. You shouldn't stay alone, he had told her. My mother will take care of you. At first, the family welcomed her politely. His mother gave her a room near the back of the house. You are part of this family, she had said. Chidinma appreciated the gesture. Living alone had been difficult, and she hoped being surrounded by family would make the waiting easier. Every morning she helped with house chores before leaving for the market. She swept the compound, fetched water, prepared breakfast. His younger sisters sometimes watched her quietly as she worked. Chidinma assumed they were simply observing, but sometimes their whispers made her feel uncomfortable. Still, she ignored it. She reminded herself that patience was important. Meanwhile, Obina kept his promise. At the end of the first month, he sent money home. Chidinma was not present when the transfer arrived. His mother received it. When Chidinma returned from the market that evening, she found the family discussing the money excitedly. Obina has started sending dollars, one of the sisters said proudly. Chidinma smiled. That's wonderful. His mother nodded. Yes, he is a good son. Chidinma assumed part of the money would be given to her, but no one mentioned it again. She decided not to ask. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe the money was meant for household expenses. She did not want to appear greedy, so she remained quiet. A few days later, something strange began happening to her body. First, it was small things. She felt tired more often. Food that once smelled delicious suddenly made her uncomfortable. One afternoon in the market, she felt dizzy while speaking to a customer. Are you all right? The woman asked. Yes, I'm fine, Chidinma replied weakly, but the dizziness did not go away. Later that evening, she returned home feeling unusually exhausted. She barely touched her dinner. His mother noticed. You didn't eat much. I'm just tired. You've been tired a lot lately. Chidinma forced a smile. I'll be fine. But deep down, she knew something was different. The following week, the symptoms became stronger. One morning she woke up feeling extremely nauseous. She rushed outside and vomited beside the compound wall. One of Obina's sisters watched her with a curious expression. You should go to the hospital, she said. Chidinma nodded slowly. I think I will. That afternoon, she visited a small clinic near the market. The waiting room was crowded with women and crying children. When her turn finally came, the nurse asked several questions. How long have you been feeling like this? About 2 weeks. Any dizziness? Yes. Loss of appetite? Yes. The nurse smiled knowingly. Let's run a quick test. Chidinma waited nervously on the small examination bed. Her heart beat faster with every passing second. Finally, the doctor entered the room holding the test results. He looked at her kindly. Congratulations, he said. You're pregnant. For a moment, Chidinma could not move. Pregnant? She repeated softly. Yes. The word echoed in her mind. Pregnant. A wave of emotions flooded through her. Joy, shock, disbelief. Her hand slowly moved to her stomach. There was a life growing inside her. Obina's child. Tears filled her eyes instantly. When she left the clinic, the sun felt brighter than usual. The world seemed different. She walked slowly toward the bus stop, holding the test results tightly. Her mind raced with thoughts. How would Obina react? Would he be happy? Of course he would. He had always talked about wanting children. She imagined his voice on the phone when she told him. The excitement, the laughter, maybe even tears of joy. But then she paused. Another thought crossed her mind. Obina had just started his new job in America. He was still trying to settle down. If she told him now, he might worry too much. The distance between them would make everything more stressful. Chidinma thought carefully. Maybe it was better to wait, just for a little while, until he felt more stable. Then she would tell him, and it would be the happiest surprise of his life. That evening, she returned to Obina's family house quietly. His mother noticed her thoughtful expression. What did the doctor say? Chidinma hesitated. It's nothing serious. You're sure? Yes. His mother shrugged and returned to watching television. Chidinma went to her room and closed the door gently. The small room felt peaceful. She sat on the bed and placed both hands on her stomach. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Hello, little one. She smiled through her tears. Your father is very far away right now, but he loves us very much. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since Obina left, she did not feel lonely anymore. She was no longer alone. Inside her was a tiny life, a secret, a miracle, a piece of the man she loved. And one day, when the time was right, she would tell him. But for now, the secret belonged only to her, and the child growing quietly beneath her heart. She closed her eyes gently, unaware that the journey ahead would soon test her strength more than she could ever imagine. At first, Chidinma tried to convince herself that things were not as bad as they seemed. After all, Obina's family had welcomed her into their home when he left for America. They had given her a room and a place to stay. She told herself she should be grateful. But as the days passed, the atmosphere inside the house slowly began to change. It started with small things, little comments, cold stares, whispers that stopped whenever she walked into a room. First, she ignored it. She believed it was just her imagination. But soon, the truth became impossible to ignore. Every morning, Chidinma woke up before anyone else in the house. She swept the compound, washed the dishes left in the sink, and prepared breakfast for the family. Even though she was pregnant and often felt weak, she never complained. She wanted to show Obina's family that she respected them. She wanted peace. But peace did not seem to exist in that house. One morning, while she was preparing pap in the kitchen, Obina's younger sister, Amaka, walked in. Amaka leaned against the doorway and watched her silently. You woke up late today, Amaka said suddenly. Chidinma looked confused. It's only 6 o'clock. That's late. Chidinma frowned slightly but said nothing. She continued stirring the pap. Amaka walked closer and looked into the pot. Is that all you're making? Yes. Amaka scoffed. You eat like a queen in this house but cook like a lazy person. Chidinma turned slowly. I'm not lazy. I woke up early to clean the compound. Amaka shrugged. That's your duty as our brother's wife. Chidinma swallowed her response. There was no point arguing. Later that evening, Obina called from America. The sound of his voice immediately brightened Chidinma's mood. How are you? He asked. I'm fine. How is my family treating you? Chidinma hesitated. Then she forced a smile even though he couldn't see it. They're taking good care of me. That's good, Obina said with relief. I'll be sending money tomorrow. You don't have to rush, she replied. I want to, he insisted. You shouldn't struggle while I'm here. Chidinma's heart tightened slightly at his words. If only he knew the truth. But she decided to remain silent. She didn't want to create problems between him and his family. The next day, Obina sent money. As usual, the transfer went directly to his mother's account. When the alert arrived, the entire house became lively. His mother called everyone into the living room. Obina has sent money again, she announced proudly. His sisters clapped excitedly. How much? One asked. His mother mentioned the amount. Chidinma's eyes widened slightly. It was a lot. More than enough to take care of everyone in the house comfortably. For a moment, she expected his mother to turn to her and say something. Perhaps she would give her part of the money. Perhaps she would say, "This is for you." But nothing like that happened. Instead, his mother stood up and began discussing how the money would be used. We need to repair the fence, she said, and buy a new television, one sister suggested. Another added, let's also repaint the sitting room. Chidinma listened quietly. Her name was never mentioned. She sat there like a visitor in someone else's house. As the weeks passed, the situation grew worse. Chidinma's pregnancy symptoms became stronger. She often felt dizzy in the mornings. Sometimes the smell of food made her nauseous. Yet despite this, the household chores never decreased. If anything, they increased. One afternoon, Chidinma returned from the market feeling extremely tired. Her feet ached badly, and her stomach felt heavy. She sat down briefly on a wooden chair in the compound to rest. Obina's mother noticed immediately. Why are you sitting there? She demanded. I'm just resting for a moment. Resting? The older woman scoffed. You young girls these days are too weak. Chidinma lowered her eyes respectfully. I'll continue soon. But his mother shook her head disapprovingly. You eat food in this house every day but cannot even work properly. The words stung. But Chidinma remained silent. She reminded herself again that patience was important. Meanwhile, Obina continued working hard in America. Every month, without fail, he sent money home. He believed his wife was living comfortably with his family. Whenever they spoke on the phone, he always asked the same question. Are you okay? And every time, Chidinma gave the same answer. Yes. She never told him the truth. She didn't want him worrying thousands of miles away. She didn't want him feeling guilty. So she endured everything quietly. One evening, the situation took a darker turn. Chidinma was eating dinner when she suddenly felt extremely hungry. Her pregnancy had increased her appetite. She stood up and went to the kitchen to serve herself a little more rice. Just as she was about to scoop the food, Obina's mother walked in. The older woman's eyes narrowed. You're eating again? Chidinma froze. I'm still hungry. His mother folded her arms. You eat too much. I'm just taking a small portion. You think food is free in this house? Chidinma stared at her in disbelief. But Obina sends money every month. The moment the words left her mouth, the room became silent. His mother's face hardened. What did you say? I just meant. So now you're counting the money my son sends? No, that's not what I meant. But the damage was already done. His mother's voice became cold. You are becoming too proud. Chidinma felt her heart pounding. I'm sorry, but the apology didn't seem to matter. From that day forward, the hostility became open. His sisters mocked her openly. If you're so hungry, go and ask your husband in America to cook for you. Another laughed. Maybe she thinks she's the queen of this house. Chidinma endured the insults quietly. Each night she returned to her small room exhausted. Sometimes she sat on the bed with tears in her eyes. Her hand would rest gently on her growing stomach. My baby, she would whisper softly. Please be strong. She worried constantly about the child, the stress, the hunger, the endless work. But she had no other place to go. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Chidinma stepped outside into the compound. The moonlight illuminated the quiet street. For a moment, she allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, just soft, silent tears. She missed Obina terribly. She missed the warmth of their small apartment. She missed the simple happiness they once had. But most of all, she wished he knew the truth. Inside the house, laughter echoed from the living room as his family watched television. The same television bought with the money Obina had sent. Money meant to care for his wife. Money that never reached her. Chidinma wiped her tears and placed her hands on her belly again. "I promise you," she whispered to her unborn child, "one day, your father will know everything." The baby shifted slightly inside her. It was the smallest movement, but it gave her strength. Because even in a house filled with cruelty, even surrounded by people who treated her like an outsider, she still had something precious: hope, and the quiet belief that one day the truth would finally come to light. By the time Chidinma reached her 7th month of pregnancy, her body had begun to change in ways she could no longer hide. Her belly had grown large and round, stretching the fabric of her simple dresses. Walking had become slower, heavier. Sometimes she needed to pause just to catch her breath. But the physical changes were not what troubled her most. It was the way Obina's family looked at her. Their eyes carried something darker now, annoyance mixed with resentment, as if her presence in the house had become a burden they could no longer tolerate. That evening, Chidinma returned from the market long after sunset. The sky was dark, and the streetlights flickered weakly along the road. Her feet ached terribly from standing all day. Every step felt like lifting a heavy stone. She placed one hand against her lower back as she walked slowly into the compound. The house was unusually quiet. Inside the living room, Obina's mother and his sisters were seated together watching television. No one greeted her. Chidinma forced a polite smile anyway. "Good evening." No one responded. She quietly walked past them toward the kitchen. Her stomach was painfully empty. She had barely eaten anything all day because business in the market had been slow. In the kitchen, she lifted the lid of one of the pots. There was rice inside, but barely enough for one person. She hesitated. Then she carefully scooped a small portion into a plate. Just as she was about to take the plate to her room, a sharp voice stopped her. "Put that down." Chidinma turned slowly. Obina's mother stood at the doorway, her face hard and angry. I was just taking a little food," Chidinma said softly. The older woman stepped closer. "That rice is not for you." Chidinma blinked in confusion. "But there's no other food." "That's not my problem." Chidinma's heart began beating faster. "I haven't eaten since morning." His mother crossed her arms. "Then you should have eaten in the market." Chidinma lowered her voice. "Please, I'm pregnant." The older woman scoffed loudly. "And whose fault is that?" The words hit Chidinma like a slap. She stared at the woman in disbelief. "I'm carrying your son's child." "And so what?" The older woman snapped. "You think that makes you special?" By now, the raised voices had attracted attention. Obina's sisters walked into the kitchen, curious. "What's happening?" one asked. "She's stealing food," their mother said coldly. Chidinma shook her head quickly. "I'm not stealing. I just took a small portion." Amaka laughed mockingly. "Look at her stomach." Another sister added, "No wonder she eats so much." Chidinma felt tears sting her eyes, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm not asking for much." His mother suddenly grabbed the plate from her hands and poured the rice back into the pot. "You will not eat this food." The humiliation burned deep inside Chidinma's chest. Her hands trembled slightly. "I don't understand why you're treating me this way," she said quietly. The older woman's eyes flashed with anger. "You want to understand?" "Yes. Because since my son left this house, you have become too comfortable. I haven't done anything wrong." "Oh, really?" the woman replied sarcastically. "You sit here eating food and acting like the queen of this house." Chidinma shook her head weakly. "I do all the chores every day." "That is the least you should do." The argument grew louder. Voices overlapped. Accusations flew across the small kitchen like arrows. Finally, Chidinma's patience cracked. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I have endured everything in this house quietly," she said. "But this is too much." Her words made the room go silent for a moment. Then Obina's mother spoke slowly. "If you don't like this house," she pointed toward the front door, "leave." Chidinma froze. "Leave? Yes. Where will I go? I don't care." The words felt cold and final. Chidinma's voice shook. "It's night. Then you should leave quickly before it becomes later." "I'm pregnant," she whispered. His mother's expression did not change. "That is not my responsibility." For several seconds, Chidinma stood there unable to move. Surely they were not serious. Surely they would calm down. But instead, Amaka walked past her into the bedroom. Moments later, she returned carrying Chidinma's small travel bag. She threw it on the floor. "Pack your things." Chidinma stared at the bag. Her heart felt like it was breaking. "You can't do this," she whispered. But Obina's mother had already turned away. "I don't want to see you in this house again tonight." The sisters dragged the bag toward the door and opened it. They began throwing Chidinma's few belongings inside. Her dresses, her sandals, her small purse, everything she owned. Tears blurred her vision. "Please," she begged softly. No one listened. Within minutes, the bag was full. Amaka grabbed it and walked outside. She dropped it onto the ground near the gate. "Take your things and go." The rain began suddenly. Heavy drops fell from the dark sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Chidinma stepped outside slowly, holding her stomach protectively. Her bag lay on the wet ground. She picked it up weakly. Behind her, the gate slammed shut. The sound echoed painfully in the quiet street. For a long moment, Chidinma stood there in the rain. Her clothes quickly became soaked. Her hair clung to her face. She looked back at the house. The windows glowed warmly with light. Inside, she could hear the faint sound of laughter from the television. It was as if she had never been part of that house at all. Chidinma slowly began walking. Each step felt heavy and uncertain. Her swollen belly made it difficult to move quickly. Rainwater splashed around her feet as she walked down the empty street. Her mind raced with fear. Where would she sleep? Who could she turn to? She had no family in the city. No friends close enough to help. She stopped under a small shop roof to catch her breath. Her body trembled from exhaustion and cold. She placed both hands on her stomach. "Please be strong," she whispered to the baby. Tears streamed down her face again. "I'm trying." The baby moved gently inside her. It was a small movement, but it reminded her that she was not completely alone. After a while, Chidinma continued walking. The rain slowly weakened into a soft drizzle. She wandered through unfamiliar streets, searching for somewhere safe. Finally, she saw an unfinished building at the corner of a quiet road. The structure had no doors or windows yet, but at least it offered shelter from the rain. She carefully climbed the concrete steps and sat down in one corner. The floor was cold and rough. Her body ached terribly, but she was too exhausted to keep moving. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. The events of the night replayed painfully in her mind. The insults, the shouting, the moment the gate slammed behind her. Her life had changed completely in a single night. Yet despite everything, one thought remained clear in her heart. Obina didn't know. He had no idea what his family had done. And one day, when the truth finally reached him, everything would change. Chidinma rested her head against the wall, her hands wrapped around her belly. In the silent darkness of the unfinished building, she whispered softly, "We will survive." The wind blew gently through the open structure, and for the first time since leaving the house, Chidinma allowed herself to sleep. Homeless, pregnant, but still holding onto the fragile hope that somewhere far away, the man who loved her would eventually come back. The unfinished building became Chidinma's first shelter. When she woke the next morning, the sky was pale gray, and the early morning breeze carried the smell of wet concrete and damp earth. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the cold floor beneath her reminded her. She slowly pushed herself up, holding her back as a sharp ache shot through her body. Her pregnancy had reached a stage where even the smallest movement felt heavy. She placed one hand gently on her swollen belly. "Good morning, my baby," she whispered softly. The baby moved slightly, as if responding. That tiny movement gave her strength. But strength alone would not solve her problems. She still had nowhere to go. Chidinma stepped out of the building and looked around. The neighborhood was quiet. A few early traders were setting up small roadside stalls, arranging vegetables and fruits on wooden tables. She walked slowly toward them, carrying her small bag. Her stomach growled painfully. She had not eaten since the previous morning. A woman selling roasted corn noticed her. "You look tired," the woman said kindly. Chidinma forced a weak smile. "I didn't sleep well." The woman studied her belly. "How many months?" "7," Chidinma replied softly. The woman shook her head sympathetically. "Pregnancy is not easy." She handed Chidinma a piece of roasted corn. "Take this." Chidinma hesitated. "I don't have money." "Just take it." Tears filled Chidinma's eyes. "Thank you." She sat on a nearby bench and ate slowly. Each bite felt like a blessing. The days that followed were the beginning of a long struggle. At first, Chidinma tried returning to Balagan Market. Selling fabrics had always been her source of income, but things were no longer the same. Her body was heavier now. Standing for long hours was exhausting. Some customers stared at her with pity. Others ignored her completely. One afternoon, she nearly fainted while negotiating with a customer. A fellow trader rushed to support her. "Chidinma, you need rest." "I can't rest," she replied weakly. "If I don't work, I won't eat." The trader looked at her sadly. "Where are you staying now?" Chidinma hesitated before answering. "I'm managing." She didn't want anyone to know she was homeless. Pride still lingered deep inside her heart. But surviving in the unfinished building soon became impossible. The nights were cold. Mosquitoes filled the air, and sometimes strange men wandered through the area looking for shelter. One night, she woke suddenly to the sound of footsteps nearby. Fear gripped her chest. She sat up quietly, listening. Two men were arguing loudly in the darkness. Her heart pounded as she realized she was not safe there. The next morning, she packed her small bag and left. After that, Chidinma began moving from place to place. Some nights she slept on wooden benches outside closed shops. Other nights she found temporary shelter inside church compounds. One pastor noticed her sitting alone one evening. "My daughter, why are you here so late?" he asked. Chidinma lowered her eyes. "I'm waiting for someone." The pastor nodded slowly. "May God protect you." He allowed her to stay inside the church corridor that night. Chidinma lay on the cold floor with her bag as a pillow. Despite the discomfort, she felt safer there. Before sleeping, she whispered a small prayer. "God, please watch over my child." Weeks passed. Her belly continued growing. Her strength continued fading. Yet somehow she kept moving forward. Sometimes strangers helped her with small acts of kindness. A woman bought her bread. A taxi driver offered her a free ride when he saw her struggling to walk. A market vendor occasionally gave her leftover food. Those small gestures kept her alive. But loneliness was the hardest part. Every night she thought about Obina. She imagined him working hard in America, believing she was safe with his family. She wondered how he would react if he saw her now, sleeping on the streets, wearing worn-out clothes, carrying his unborn child. Sometimes the thought made her cry, but she always wiped her tears quickly. She didn't want to appear weak, not even to herself. One afternoon, while resting under a large tree near the roadside, she felt something unusual, a sudden tightening in her stomach. She froze. Another tightening followed. Fear rushed through her body. "Not yet," she whispered nervously. She was only 8 months pregnant. The baby was not supposed to come yet. She took slow breaths until the pain faded. But the experience frightened her deeply. She realized something important. She needed help. She could not continue living like this, not with the baby coming soon. That evening, She found a small roadside kiosk where an elderly woman sold food. Chidinma approached slowly. "Madam, can I help you wash plates in exchange for food?" The woman looked at her carefully. "You're pregnant." "Yes. You should be resting." "I just need something to eat." The elderly woman sighed. "All right, wash those plates." Chidinma washed dishes for nearly 2 hours. Her back ached terribly. But when she finished, the woman gave her a full plate of rice and stew. Chidinma nearly cried with gratitude. As she ate, the woman spoke gently. "You shouldn't be alone like this." Chidinma remained silent. Sometimes explaining the truth felt too painful. By the time the 8th month arrived, Chidinma looked very different. Her once bright clothes were faded and worn. Her face looked thinner, but her belly stood proudly before her, round and full of life. Despite everything, the baby inside her remained strong. Every kick reminded her why she kept fighting. One evening, she sat on a wooden bench near a roadside shop watching cars pass. The city lights glowed brightly in the distance. People walked by laughing and talking. No one noticed the pregnant woman sitting quietly on the bench. Chidinma placed her hand gently on her stomach again. "Your father will come back," she whispered softly. "I know he will." She closed her eyes for a moment. Deep inside her heart, she held onto one belief. Somewhere far away, Obinna was working hard to build a better life for them. And one day, he would return. When that day came, he would search for her. And when he finally saw the truth, everything would change. Chidinma opened her eyes and looked up at the night sky. The stars flickered faintly above the city. Despite the hunger, the exhaustion, and the loneliness, she allowed herself a small smile. Because no matter how dark life had become, hope was still alive. And hope was sometimes the only thing a person needed to survive. 8 months had passed since Obinna left Nigeria. 8 long months filled with hard work, sleepless nights, and constant determination. Life in America had not been as easy as he imagined. The first few weeks were the hardest. The cold weather shocked him. The unfamiliar streets made him feel lost. And the fast-paced lifestyle forced him to learn quickly. But Obinna refused to give up. Every day he woke up before sunrise and reported to the construction site where he worked as a supervisor. The job demanded discipline. The workers expected leadership. The company expected results. But Obinna was used to hard work. He threw himself into the job with complete focus. He supervised projects, checked building plans, and ensured deadlines were met. Slowly, his supervisors began noticing his dedication. "You work harder than most people here," one of them told him. Obinna simply smiled. He wasn't working hard for praise. He was working for his family. Every night after work, Obinna called Chidinma. No matter how tired he was, he always made time to hear her voice. Those calls were the highlight of his day. Sometimes they talked about small things. The weather, the market, funny stories about people they knew. Other times they talked about their dreams. "I'm saving money already," Obinna told her during one call. "That's good," Chidinma replied softly. "As soon as I have enough, I'll start processing your travel documents." Chidinma smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I'll be waiting." But even through the phone, Obinna sometimes sensed something different in her voice. "You sound tired," he said one evening. "I just came back from the market." "You're not overworking yourself, are you?" "No," she answered quickly. "I'm fine." Obinna trusted her words. After all, he believed she was safe with his family. He had no reason to think otherwise. As the months passed, Obinna saved almost every dollar he earned. He lived in a small shared apartment with 2 other Nigerian workers. The space was cramped, but it helped him reduce expenses. "I'm only here temporarily," he often reminded himself. His goal was bigger. He wanted to bring Chidinma to America. He wanted them to start a new life together. Sometimes, after long workdays, he would sit quietly in his small room and imagine the future. He imagined Chidinma walking beside him on clean American streets. He imagined their future children growing up in a better environment. Those dreams kept him motivated. One evening, Obinna received good news from his company. The project he had been supervising was completed successfully. His supervisor called him into the office. "You've done excellent work," the man said. "Thank you. We'd like to keep you on for the next project." Relief washed over Obinna. A stable job meant stable income, and stable income meant his dream could move forward faster. That night, he called Chidinma with excitement. "Everything is going well here," he told her. "That's wonderful. And I've been thinking." "What?" "I want to come home soon." There was a short silence on the phone. "Home," Chidinma repeated. "Yes, just for a short visit." "Why?" "I want to see you." Her heart raced, but she forced her voice to remain calm. "That would be nice." Obinna smiled. "I'll start planning the trip." Over the next few weeks, Obinna made several important decisions. He used part of his savings to invest in a large house in Nigeria, a beautiful mansion in a quiet neighborhood. He wanted to surprise Chidinma. When she arrived in America later, the house would serve as a comfortable place for them whenever they visited Nigeria. He imagined her excitement when she saw it. "This will make her happy," he thought. After finalizing the purchase, he booked his flight. The day finally arrived. Obinna packed his bags carefully. Inside one suitcase were gifts for Chidinma, beautiful dresses, shoes, perfume, and baby clothes he had bought during a moment of hopeful dreaming. He smiled when he saw the tiny clothes. "One day soon," he whispered. Then he closed the suitcase. The journey back to Nigeria felt shorter than the journey to America months earlier. His heart was full of anticipation. As the plane descended toward Lagos, Obinna looked through the window. The familiar sight of the city filled him with emotion. "I'm finally home," he murmured. When he stepped out of the airport, the warm Nigerian air greeted him like an old friend. The noise, the traffic, the lively energy, everything felt familiar. But his mind focused on only one thing, Chidinma. He went directly to his family house. The gate opened, and his sisters ran outside excitedly. "Obinna!" They hugged him warmly. "You're finally back." His mother came out slowly, smiling proudly. "My son." Obinna hugged her respectfully. "I've missed everyone." After greeting them, he asked the question that had been in his heart since he arrived. "Where is Chidinma?" The room became strangely quiet. His sisters glanced at each other. His mother looked away. Obinna frowned. "Where is she?" His mother cleared her throat. "She left." Obinna blinked. "Left?" "Yes." "What do you mean she left?" "She moved away." Obinna felt a sudden chill run through his body. "Moved where?" His mother shrugged. "We don't know." His heartbeat quickened. "That doesn't make sense." "She said she wanted to start her own life." Obinna stared at them in disbelief. "Chidinma would never leave without telling me." His sisters remained silent. The uneasiness in the room grew heavier. "Tell me the truth," Obinna demanded. But no one answered. That night, Obinna could not sleep. Something felt terribly wrong. Chidinma had always been loyal and loving. She would never disappear without explanation. The next morning, he began searching. He went to Balogun Market. The traders recognized him immediately. "Obinna, you're back." "Yes," he said anxiously. "Have you seen Chidinma?" The traders exchanged worried glances. One woman sighed deeply. "My son. You didn't know?" "Know what?" The woman looked at him with pity. "She hasn't been here for months." Obinna felt his chest tighten. "What happened to her?" The woman hesitated before answering. "Your family drove her away." The words struck him like lightning. "Drove her away?" "Yes. And she was pregnant." Obinna's world collapsed in that moment. Pregnant. His child. And she had been suffering alone. His hands trembled. "Do you know where she is?" "No," the woman said sadly. "But people have seen her around the roadside shops sometimes." Obinna ran back to his car immediately. His heart pounded violently. He had to find her. No matter how long it took. No matter where she was. He would search every street in the city. Because somewhere out there, his wife was suffering. And he had been too far away to protect her. But now he was back. And he would not stop searching until he found her. Obinna barely slept that night. The trader's words from the market echoed endlessly in his mind. Your family drove her away. She was pregnant. Every time he closed his eyes, the same painful thoughts returned. Chidinma had been alone, pregnant, homeless, and he had been thousands of miles away believing she was safe. The guilt weighed heavily on his chest like a stone. By dawn, he was already awake, determined, restless. He had to find her. That morning, Obinna left the house before anyone else woke up. He did not want to face his family. Not yet. If what the market trader said was true, he feared the anger inside him might explode. Instead, he got into his car and began driving through the city. His mind raced as he searched every place he could think of. He checked Balagan Market again. He asked food vendors, traders, and bus drivers, "Have you seen a pregnant woman named Chidinma?" Some people shook their heads. Others simply shrugged. Hours passed. The sun climbed high into the sky, but Obinna refused to give up. By afternoon, exhaustion began creeping into his body. He parked the car beside a roadside shop and stepped out. A woman was frying akara nearby. The smell filled the air. Obinna approached her. "Good afternoon." "Good afternoon," she replied. "I'm looking for someone." "Who?" "My wife." The woman looked curious. "What does she look like?" "She's pregnant. About 8 months." The woman's expression changed slightly. "Many pregnant women pass through here. Her name is Chidinma." The woman frowned thoughtfully. Then she pointed down the street. "There is a pregnant woman who sometimes sits near the kiosk at the end of that road." Obinna's heart began pounding. "Thank you." Without another word, he hurried toward the direction she pointed. The road was dusty and quiet. Small roadside shops lined the edges. People moved slowly in the afternoon heat. Obinna walked faster and faster, his heart beating louder with each step. Then suddenly, he saw her. At first, he wasn't completely sure. A woman sat on a wooden bench beside a small roadside shop. Her clothes were worn. Her hair looked unkempt. Her belly was large and heavy. She looked thinner than he remembered. But something about her posture felt painfully familiar. Obinna stopped walking. His chest tightened. "Chidinma." The name slipped out of his mouth like a whisper. The woman slowly lifted her head. Their eyes met. For a moment, time froze. Chidinma stared at him in disbelief. Her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Obinna, standing right in front of her. She blinked several times. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. But he was still there. His eyes filled with shock. His face pale with pain. "Chidinma," he said again, his voice breaking. Tears instantly filled her eyes. "Obinna." The moment she said his name, Obinna rushed forward. He fell to his knees in front of her. "My God!" His eyes scanned her body quickly. Her thin face, her worn clothes, her enormous belly. His hands trembled. "What happened to you?" The question carried so much pain that Chidinma could not answer immediately. Tears began streaming down her face. "I thought you were safe," he whispered. Chidinma shook her head slowly. "No." Obinna covered his face with his hands. A broken sob escaped his chest. "I'm sorry." People passing by on the road slowed down, curious about the emotional scene. But Obinna didn't care. His entire world existed only in that moment. Chidinma slowly placed her hand on his shoulder. "Please stand up." But Obinna shook his head. "I failed you." "No," she said softly. "You didn't know. I should have known." "How?" "You were suffering while I was sending money home." Chidinma hesitated. "Your family never gave me the money." The words struck him like lightning. "What?" "They kept everything." Obinna felt anger rising inside him. "And they threw you out?" "Yes." "When?" 8 months ago." The realization crushed him. 8 months. His wife had been homeless for 8 months, carrying his child, surviving alone. Obinna looked at her stomach again. "Is that my baby?" Chidinma nodded slowly. "Yes." A mixture of joy and pain flooded his heart. He gently placed his trembling hand on her belly. The baby kicked slightly. Obinna gasped softly. He moved. Chidinma smiled weakly. He does that a lot. More tears filled Obinna's eyes. I missed everything. For several minutes, they simply held each other. Neither of them cared about the people watching nearby. Obinna wrapped his arms carefully around Chidinma, afraid of hurting her. She leaned against him, exhausted but relieved. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Finally, Obinna spoke again. Come with me. Where? Home. Chidinma looked uncertain. Your family. My family will not touch you again. His voice was firm. There was a strength in his tone that she had never heard before. This was not the same Obinna who left months earlier. This was a man who had seen the consequences of betrayal. Obinna helped her slowly into his car. He opened the passenger door carefully. Be careful. Chidinma sat down slowly, holding her belly. The soft seat felt like luxury compared to the hard benches and floors she had slept on for months. As Obinna started the engine, he looked at her again. I should have protected you. You're here now, she replied quietly. He nodded. Yes, and this time he meant it. Instead of driving to his family house, Obinna drove to the new mansion he had bought. The large house stood proudly in a quiet neighborhood. Tall gates, wide compound, beautiful architecture. He had imagined Chidinma living there comfortably while he worked abroad. But when they arrived, something shocking happened. Several familiar faces appeared in the compound. His mother, his sisters, they were all living there. Obinna's grip tightened on the steering wheel. So this is where the money went, he muttered angrily. Chidinma looked confused. What is it? That house was supposed to be for you. The truth finally became clear. While Chidinma had been homeless, his family had been living comfortably in the mansion he bought for her. Obinna felt rage burning through his chest. He stepped out of the car slowly. Chidinma watched nervously as he walked toward the house. His family noticed him immediately. Obinna! One sister shouted happily, but their smiles quickly faded when they saw the expression on his face. His voice thundered across the compound. Everyone, get out of my house. The command was cold, sharp, and final. For the first time in their lives, they realized Obinna had finally learned the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The compound fell silent after Obinna's words. Everyone, get out of my house. The command echoed across the wide yard of the mansion. His mother and sisters stared at him in disbelief. For a moment, none of them moved. They had never seen Obinna like this before. His normally calm face was filled with anger, disappointment, and something even deeper, betrayal. His mother was the first to speak. What did you just say? She asked sharply. Obinna took a slow step forward. I said leave my house. One of his sisters laughed nervously. Obinna, you just arrived. Maybe you're tired. I'm not tired. His voice was firm and cold. His mother folded her arms. This is our house too. Obinna's eyes flashed. No. He pointed toward the building. I bought this house for my wife. The words hung heavily in the air. For the first time, his family noticed the car parked behind him. And inside the car, they saw Chidinma. Her swollen belly was clearly visible through the window. Her worn clothes told a painful story. Shock spread across their faces. His mother's voice suddenly softened. My son, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Obinna replied. I went to the market this morning. Silence. I spoke to people who knew what happened. His sisters looked at each other nervously. You threw my pregnant wife out of your house. No one denied it. That silence was enough. Obinna's fists clenched. 8 months, he said slowly. For 8 months she suffered on the streets while you lived here comfortably. His mother stepped forward. She was disrespectful. Obinna laughed bitterly. Disrespectful. She argued with me. And that justified throwing her out while she was carrying my child? His mother had no answer. Chidinma slowly stepped out of the car. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand. The moment his family saw her clearly, the reality of their actions became unavoidable. She looked exhausted, thin, worn. But her baby bump stood proudly in front of her, a silent witness to everything she had endured. One of Obina's sisters spoke quietly. We didn't know she was suffering like that. Chidinma looked at her calmly. You knew. Her voice was soft but steady. You just didn't care. The sister looked away in shame. Obina walked toward Chidinma and gently placed an arm around her shoulders. Are you okay? She nodded, but he could see how tired she was. Turning back toward his family, his expression hardened again. You have 1 hour, he said, to pack your things. His mother's face filled with anger. You would throw your own family out? You already threw mine out, Obina replied coldly. The words struck like thunder. For a long moment no one spoke. Finally, his sisters began walking toward the house quietly. They knew there was no point arguing. Obina's decision was final. Within an hour, bags began appearing in the compound. Suitcases, boxes, household items. His family moved around quickly, packing their belongings. His mother continued muttering angrily under her breath. But she knew the situation had changed. Obina was no longer the quiet son who avoided conflict. He had seen the truth, and the truth had hardened his heart. When the final bags were carried out, Obina opened the gate. You can go now. His mother paused at the gate. You will regret this, she said bitterly. Obina looked at her calmly. No, he replied. I regret trusting you. Those words ended the conversation. His family walked out slowly, disappearing down the street. When the gate closed behind them, the compound fell quiet again. For the first time, the mansion truly belonged to the people it was meant for. Obina turned toward Chidinma. She stood quietly beside the car, watching everything. Her eyes were filled with mixed emotions. Relief, sadness, exhaustion. Obina walked over to her gently. It's over, he said softly. Chidinma looked at the large house. You bought this? Yes. For me. For us. Tears filled her eyes. After everything she had endured, the idea of having a real home again felt almost unreal. Obina opened the front door and guided her inside. The house was beautiful. Large living room, clean white walls, soft furniture. Chidinma walked slowly through the space, touching the walls gently. She had slept on cold floors and wooden benches for months. Now she stood inside a mansion. The contrast felt overwhelming. Suddenly her legs weakened. Obina caught her quickly. Easy. I'm just tired. You need rest. He helped her sit on the couch. I'm calling a doctor. 2 weeks later, the baby arrived. It was early morning when Chidinma felt the first strong contraction. She grabbed Obina's arm tightly. I think it's time. Within minutes, they were on their way to the hospital. The delivery was long and painful, but Obina never left her side. He held her hand through every contraction. You're doing great, he whispered. Finally, the doctor smiled. One more push. Chidinma gathered the last of her strength. And then, the room filled with the sound of a baby crying. It's a boy, the doctor announced. Tears poured down Obina's face. He held the tiny child carefully in his arms. Our son. Chidinma looked at the baby with exhausted joy. All the suffering, all the loneliness, all the pain. In that moment, it felt worth it. Weeks later, life slowly began to feel normal again. The mansion was now filled with laughter instead of tension. Baby toys replaced the cold silence that once filled the rooms. Obina spent every day making up for the months he had missed. He changed diapers. He rocked the baby to sleep. Sometimes he simply watched his son sleeping peacefully. I almost lost all of this, he whispered one night. Chidinma sat beside him. But you found us. He looked at her seriously. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never suffer like that again. Chidinma smiled softly. I believe you. A few months later, they returned to America together. This time, Chidinma was not alone. She carried their baby in her arms as they walked through the airport. Obina held her hand tightly. Their journey had been filled with pain, but it had also revealed something powerful. Love that survives betrayal becomes stronger than before. As the plane lifted into the sky, Chidinma looked out the window. She remembered the day she had stood in the airport watching Obina leave. Back then, she had been full of hope but unaware of the suffering ahead. Now everything was different. She was stronger, wiser, and no longer alone. Obina squeezed her hand gently. Ready for our new life? Chidinma looked at their baby sleeping peacefully. Then she smiled. Yes. And together, they flew toward a future that had been tested by hardship, but built on a love that refused to break. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.